Don't give up, you know it's true. You gotta do what you wanna do.
Hello, welcome to UPSC Gangsters. This is Arjun. I'll be taking you through the editorial and opinion columns part of the Hindu newspaper for the date 5th October 2017. Alright, so let's get started. The first editorial, the heading says, Gathering clouds over West Asia. If the US refuses to certify Iran's compliance on the nuclear deal, it will provoke a new spell of uncertainty. So this is the heading. This article is about the Iran nuclear deal that was completed during the tenure of Obama, and its reviews coming up. Alright, a meeting is coming up, and Donald Trump's stance with Iran, as you know, he said it is one of the worst deals that USA has done in history. Alright, so he's totally against it. So whatever he's gonna say will have a big bearing on the Middle East peace. Alright, so let's get started. West Asia is in a period of heightened uncertainty. In the Levant, regional powers are scrambling to fill the vacuum created by the steady dismantling of the Islamic State's Sham Caliphate across Syria and Iraq. So Levant, what Levant means, Levant, I've told you before. Alright, Levant is the area, the adjoining areas of Israel, together with Palestine, together with parts of Turkey, Syria, Iran, Iraq and all. Alright, so in United States, in western countries, alright, that area is known as the Levant region. Alright, Levant. So they are known as the Levant region. So keep that in mind when they are referring to Levant. It means the Middle East practically, not the Saudi Arabia part, but the one towards the western side, alright, towards Israel, Palestine and all that. So this is the first point. So the same line, Kurds, buoyed by their pivotal position in this race to Raqqa, have held an independence referendum drawing the ire of their Iraqi, Turkish and Iranian neighbors, with every chance of a conflagration in disputed oil-rich areas such as Kirkuk. Alright, so this is another extra point. I think it's so important for you to remember. The Kurds are actually planning for a referendum in the area to have a separate state or a separate country for themselves. Alright, so the Kurdish people are the ones who fought the ISIS and all the other terrorist groups allied to it. Alright, so they were the groups, those ethnic groups that created, that came out of the after Iraq invasion. Alright, the militant group that came up after the Iraq invasion and all that. So basically that is what this line says. Next point, Turkey continues its authoritarian descent as its relations with Europe grow sourer by the day. So Turkey, has an authoritarian leader. Alright, though elected democratically, he is someone who likes the power of the country to stay with the executive. Alright, he is not willing to share the power with the other organs of the government, and certainly not with the judiciary too. So he is kind of autocratic. That's what they are saying here. And his relations with the European Union is actually diminishing by the day. Alright, so he's not having big support from European Union. If he had the support of European Union, Turkey would have been a member of the European Union long back, but it's not a member of European Union till now. Alright, so Turkey is actually the gateway to Middle East from Europe, alright, and vice versa. So Turkey is very much within the lines of European Union, but still it's not inside. Alright, so there has been a lot of misunderstanding between them, and right now the misunderstanding has been going wider. So next point, Turkey continues its next point. In the Persian Gulf, a crisis within the Gulf Cooperation Council, pitting Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates against maverick Qatar, has entered its 6th month with no sign of resolution. Within Saudi Arabia, the young and ambitious heir to the throne, Mohammed bin Salman, is experimenting with an unpredictable mix of reform and repression, with women permitted to drive at the same time as dissident poets, clerics, and intellectuals are carted to jail. Right? So there is an ongoing issue between Qatar and United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. Alright, so Qatar supporting the terrorist groups and all that. Those people who are against UAE and Saudi Arabia, that has been the accusation against Qatar. Alright, so a lot of friction was happening of late between them, suspending Qatar visas and all that, and deporting people back to Qatar and all that. Alright, so even that is not resolved yet, and nothing in the direction of a resolution is happening when you take the problem between Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar. All right, and on the other side you have the ruler of Saudi, all right, who is actually a mixture of oppression as well as freedom, liberty. All right, he is giving women rights and all that one by one, and at the same time he is actually imprisoning all those people who are speaking against him and all. All right. Let's get to the next line. However, the biggest shock of all may lie ahead of us. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, a nuclear deal agreed between Iran and 6 major powers, will celebrate its 2nd anniversary. So, note this. This is supposed to be the name that was given to the nuclear deal that was signed between Iran and the other 6 major powers, including United States and the European Union. The name is the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. It was and remains a landmark piece of diplomacy. Alright, so this nuclear deal is actually celebrating its 2nd anniversary on October 18th. They say it is and remains a landmark piece of diplomacy which recognized Iran's right to enrich uranium in exchange for a battery of tough but time-bound limits on nuclear activity. Time-bound limits means, if you take, for example, if you take a year, all right, so let's have the time frame as a year. So the first month would be having the strictest and harshest regulations, all right, harshest regulations and sanctions. So the very next month the sanctions will be eased, and the next month after that the sanctions will be eased even more, the regulations will be eased even more. So finally, when the year is done, there won't be any sort of regulations, alright, there won't be any sort of sanctions. So that is only known as time-bound limits on nuclear activity. In this case, time-bound limits on nuclear activity. Alright, so uranium enrichment means, you should know that, making the uranium that is available with them to a more usable format. Alright, so making the uranium usable for producing energy or weapons. Alright, so that was the problem when Iran was trying to enrich uranium and all that. These countries actually started having some sort of reservations about it. So enriching uranium, so when they were enriching uranium for power generation, the world nations thought that this might be used for making nuclear weapons as well. Alright, so because enriched uranium is used for making nuclear weapons. Alright, so you can always use even the spent fuel from the uranium that is used for nuclear energy and still create nuclear weapons. Alright, so that has been the problem, and that is why, and Iran being a communist nation, that would be the first thing that they would do, right? So this was a very good deal that was struck by United States and the other countries with Iran to actually have a time-bound regulation for the nuclear energy thing. Alright, so that is what this deal is about. So the next line: through an adroit mixture of pressure, incentives, and dog diplomacy, it diffused a crisis that had burned since the 1990s, threatening to spiral into a war in the 2010s. Nevertheless, conservative forces in Israel, the Arab world, and the US denounced the agreement. They complained that it did not address Iran's non-nuclear behavior, such as support for Hezbollah and other militant organizations, and that the sunset clauses, which progressively relaxed the constraints on Iran over the next 3 decades, were too generous. Alright, so the right-wing people, the conservative forces of US and all the other countries that were involved in the deal, those people did not like the deal. Alright, so the right wing and the conservative forces, they are always ready for war. Alright, they are very violent people. Alright, so exactly that is the kind of guy who the United States have as a president right now. Alright, so that is why this meeting is going to be really important. So he is totally against, just like a typical right-wing conservative, he's against the deal. And they say that it was not actually, the deal did not have any sort of conditions for Iran to back down on their support for Hezbollah and other militant organizations which they support. According to them, alright, it's not proven actually. So according to the right wing, Iran actually supports Hezbollah and other militant organizations, and these things were not discussed in the deal. Alright, so they feel this is giving too much to them. The next point. Last November, one of these critics won the US presidency. Just like I said, alright, the conservative right-wing Donald Trump was elected, right? So that is what they're talking about here. In his inaugural speech to the UN General Assembly, Donald Trump called the deal one of the worst and most one-sided transactions the United States has ever entered into. Mr. Trump and members of his administration have repeatedly but falsely claimed that Iran is violating the agreement. On October 15, he must certify Iran's compliance. If he refuses to do so, it would open the way for the US Congress to reimpose sanctions on Iran, which would automatically violate the agreement. Alright, so him and his administration are accusing Iran of using this nuclear deal in the wrong way. They don't have any proof for it, but they are doing that. So come October 15th, if he's gonna do something against the deal, already he has spoken against it in the UN General Assembly. If he's gonna speak against it during the meeting and all, so this situation would go out of control and US will end up imposing sanctions on Iran. Alright, next point. True to his reality show past, Mr. Trump has declared that he has made his decision, but will not reveal it even to close allies who have asked him, such as British Prime Minister Theresa May. If Mr. Trump tears up the agreement, all is not necessarily lost. In a recent interview, Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif noted that Europe's reaction will have extremely important ramifications for the future of the deal. The UK, France, Germany and the European Union have all expressed their categorical support. Alright? So what they are saying, even if Trump actually backs down from the nuclear deal, EU will come in support. Alright, the European nations will come out in support, and they'll make sure that Iran is not affected by the sanctions that would be imposed by USA. Alright, so that's what he's saying. And those forces in Europe right now, the majority of them, the most powerful of them, are all left-wing. Alright, so they are completely against the ideologies of Trump and his administration. So it is obvious that they will come to the aid of the Iranian government. Alright. If the US reimposes so-called secondary sanctions, which cover foreign companies, Europe would most likely take legal and diplomatic steps to protect its substantial commerce with Iran, even at the cost of a transatlantic crisis. What they're saying here is, if USA is gonna do some sort of sanctions like that, and secondary sanctions means the sanctions that are related to trade, alright? So not like the supply of oil and all that and all. The secondary sanctions means the companies will be barred from trading with the country, alright, and those companies that are belonging to the country will be barred from trading with the country that is imposing the sanctions. That is only called secondary sanctions. So if these sort of sanctions come into being, what would Europe do? It would extend its support. All right, so it would extend its support, even though it might anger United States and its allies. They would still go ahead to protect their trade interests. All right, so that they are ready to risk. All right, so next point. In the first half of this year alone, European Union Iran trade stood at around $12 billion, a 95% increase over the same period last year. Alright, compared to last year, this year's trade between European Union and Iran has been $12 billion. Alright, so this is supposed to be a 95% increase. Alright, this is a roughly 30 times larger than US-Iran trade. So this trade is actually large, 30 times bigger than the trade value between USA and Iran. European banks, manufacturers, and energy companies have also signed dozens of major agreements with Iran over the past year. So anyways, you should remember the fact that the EU trade with Iran, alright, is 30 times United States trade with Iran. Alright, so that you have to remember, that previous point. And this current point what we are discussing, European banks, manufacturers and energy companies have also signed dozens of major agreements with Iran over the past year. The European Union has jurisdiction over the SWIFT network for cross-border banking transactions. So what is the SWIFT network? Well, that SWIFT network is related to banking transactions. Alright, so it actually for worldwide interbank financial telecommunication. So that is what SWIFT stands for. Please note it down. Alright, worldwide interbank financial telecommunication network. That is only SWIFT. So this actually enables financial institutions, banks and all that worldwide to send and receive information about financial transactions in a secure, standardized and reliable environment. Alright, so it's like a network that connects all the banks all over the world. Alright, so they can actually sort of share information of the transactions that happens in their banks. So these would actually lead to secure transactions, to know where the money is coming from, to know whether these are illegal transactions and all that. Alright, so it makes the banking system more secure. So that is what SWIFT is all about. So getting back to the point, alright, the European Union has jurisdiction over the SWIFT network for cross-border banking transactions. Iran was cut off from this network for 4 years, but Brussels would resist any US demands to do so again. Alright, so Iran was actually away from this network for 4 years, but after the deal was struck, they were allowed into the SWIFT network. Alright, so now they are already an integral part of it. So if US is gonna do some sort of sanctions, the European Union will again not abide by US restrictions. They would continue to do so, and this time from the financial perspective, because they have been a member of the SWIFT network. Alright, and they don't want that network to be broken. So that is why. China, Iran's main trading partner, and Russia, Iran's military ally in Syria, would defy US sanctions with even greater enthusiasm. In September, China provided a $10 billion line of credit to Iran's banks, denominated in euros and yuan, with another $15 billion in infrastructure projects. In short, it would be virtually impossible to rebuild today the broad multinational sanctions regime that helped push Iran to the negotiating table during the 2013-2015 period. Alright, so you have to know one thing. China, obviously being a communist nation, Iran being a communist nation, China is the largest trading partner of Iran. Alright, and when USA is trying to impose sanctions on Iran, China and Russia would be more enthusiastic in investing in Iran and compensating for the sanctions that have been imposed on them by US. So that is what they basically do, right? So China and Russia is totally against USA. So when they do all these things, and European Union is also there to support Iran, so whatever US will do from the front of sanctions will not have any sort of effect on Iran. That is what this point says. Next point. If Iran were therefore persuaded that its reintegration into the world economy could continue regardless, this would be a powerful incentive for Tehran to abide by JCPOA. Alright? So all of these people are gonna support Iran even if US is gonna do something like that. So therefore Iran would like to abide by the agreement. That's what this point says. Alright, so JCPOA, they will try their level best to abide by it because of the support they are getting from the other countries. Alright. The other scenario, however, a less happy scenario is equally possible. If the deal collapses, Tehran is unlikely to expel inspectors entirely as Iraq did in 1997, or withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty like North Korea in 2003. Such steps would undercut Iran's professions of peaceful intent and cede the moral high ground. Alright, so there is another scenario which is highly unlikely, where Iran could suspend those people who regularly come to inspect their nuclear facilities, alright, from the International Atomic Energy Union. There will be inspectors that come and visit the nuclear facilities to see whether they are doing it in the right way and they're not using the materials for building a bomb. Alright, so that is there. So if these sort of sanctions go and Iran suddenly becomes mad, alright, they might suspend those people from entering Iran, alright, those inspectors from entering Iran, same way Iraq did during their period. And they would also try to pull off from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. So for those of you who do not know what NPT is, Non-Proliferation Treaty is actually not conducting any nuclear bomb tests, alright, beyond a certain strength. Alright, so you should not do that. That is what NPT stands for. So you should not build up your nuclear arsenal. You are, on the contrary, are expected to reduce your nuclear weapons. Alright, so that was a treaty that was signed between the major nations, major nuclear power nations. Alright, so North Korea actually stepped back from that treaty in 2003. So same way Iran would also try to do, if they are sort of in a mental state to do that. Such steps would undercut Iran's professions and peaceful intent and cede the moral high ground. Alright, so if they do something like this, it no longer is it sends a message that Iran is no longer abiding by the JCPOA. So this would actually ruin the support they have with China, Russia and the European Union and the other countries that would support Iran in case US impose sanctions, right? Next point. Prior to this point, Tehran was rapidly accumulating centrifuges and stockpiles of enriched uranium, such that it could accumulate enough fissile material for a nuclear device. Within a few months, had it chosen to do so, absent diplomacy, Iran might have shrunk that time to weeks or days, which would have made it hard, perhaps prohibitively so, to detect any Iranian dash to a bomb. If sanctions were the West's way of pressuring Iran, nuclear buildup was and could once more be Iran's own bargaining chip. Alright, so they are saying if even a slow intent of putting the sanctions are there, Iran can any day use the fissile material that is reaching them and use it to make a bomb. Alright, so in a secret fashion. If they do that, again it is going to be something like a bargaining chip for Iran. Alright, just like how North Korea is threatening USA. So they will start to threaten USA once again, but it's going to be Iran this time. Alright, so either ways, what they are projecting that US might do, alright, is actually kind of something that would work against USA. Alright, so if they're going to put sanctions and do away with the JCPOA, US is going to actually suffer. So that is what this point means, any which ways you look at it. Next point. Certainly Tehran would have to balance the advantages of this course against the risks that it would provoke Europeans into siding reluctantly with Washington, and that it may push the US, Israel, or both into a preventive war. While President Barack Obama always kept the military option on the table, his threshold for the use of force is likely to have been considerably higher than that of his erratic, impulsive successor. Or if war situation comes, what they are saying basically is US will enter Iran with the help of Israel. Alright? So Barack Obama always had the option of invading Iran and all that, but he was also considering other options, alright, how to avoid war and all that. But his successor, Donald Trump, is not like that. He's more impulsive, he's more erratic, he just does whatever that comes to his mind on that particular current situation, alright. So he's somebody who doesn't think a lot. So that's what this point says. It is not clear how Iran's segmented leadership divided between elected president and autocratic supreme leader will weigh these factors, but the probability of an armed conflict would rise sharply if Mr. Trump walked away. Alright, so the same point, repeated again in different words. So Trump, if he is going to pull back from this treaty, the next very option is going to be war. Alright, so, and Trump is not shy about war because he knows for a fact that he's not going to fight the war. Somebody is going to fight for him. So he's already known for being erratic and taking stupid decisions. So he would gladly do that. So that's what this point says. Next point, the futility of war. Not only would a war fail to eradicate Iran's nuclear know-how, it would have far-reaching regional consequences. Iran's Revolutionary Guards could unleash Shia militia against US troops in Iraq and expand support to Afghan insurgents just as Mr. Trump's surge gets underway. So you have to remember one fact: Iran is a big country, alright? It is really bigger than Iraq, and the population is also huge. So during this situation, if a situation comes that USA is going to invade Iran would immediately gather its support from Iraq troops, those militia that are there, the militant groups in Iraq, militant groups in Afghanistan and all that, and together they will start fighting. And remember, Iran has Russian weapons and all that. Alright, so Iran is not a joke by any means. So this will be a tough war. Even before US lands there, they would have a lot of militant group support, and US bases that are there in Afghanistan and Iraq and all that would be easily taken down. Alright, so that would make things tougher for USA. Saudi-Iran tensions would spike, and the risks of a US-Russia confrontation in West Asia would jump dramatically. So Saudi, on the other hand, is a supporter of United States, and Saudi people are dead against Iran Muslims. Alright, so Saudi would obviously join Iran in this. Saudi would obviously join USA in this fight, and when that happens, alright, tensions in that region would spike. So obviously this would be a confrontation. This would lead to a confrontation between USA and Russia in the long shot, right? So if that happens, you know how that would end. More broadly, abrogation of the JCPOA would be devastating for Washington's credibility in future diplomacy. Yes, if JCPOA, if that agreement goes down, alright, so the world will not believe US diplomacy anymore, because they might do something during some president's tenure, and when the next president comes, those treaties will be washed off. Alright, so you cannot rely on the American promise. That's what they're saying. So American promise would have no meaning then. So in international context, USA will lose face. So USA will lose its credibility. All this would be unwelcome news for India, while Indian imports of Iranian oil have been falling regardless. The Chabahar project, scheduled for completion next year, could face fresh obstacles. Iran-Pakistan relations may also shift unpredictably and in ways that work against Indian interests. So we are building the Chabahar port with Iran, right? So there will be a direct link for the oil embargo between Iran and India, and Iran's oil is cheap comparatively. Alright, so the Chabahar port thing will also get affected. So when these things happen, and Iran would obviously try to side with Pakistan and all that, so that would create a kind of tension for us, alright, for India. Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj is likely to have conveyed these concerns to her US counterpart Rex Tillerson at their meeting in New York in late September. But Mr. Tillerson, 30 years ago, appears peripheral to American foreign policy, and so we await the judgment of the Mad King. So Mad King, obviously Trump they're referring to. Alright, so this is the situation. So come 15th October, after that we'll know what happens. So 15th October is the date. So let's see what happens. Moving on to the next editorial. The heading says Coal-Fired Projections. The Niti Aayog's Draft National Energy Policy (DNEP). Alright, so I'm just taking the important points from this entire editorial. Alright, so the first important point. The DNEP acknowledges that India's oil consumption has grown 63% from 2005 to 2016. Please note it down. Alright, so this will be very useful for your mains answers. Alright, our consumption has risen to 63%. Alright, from 2005 to 2016. So there has been a huge jump in the past 10 years. Whereas refining capacity has grown only 15%. So this also you should note, refining capacity has grown only 15%. So we are importing crude oil, right? We are not importing the direct petroleum or diesel. We import crude oil, alright, and we refine it in our own facilities. Okay, so the refining process only is behind the high price here. So that is another big story, but basically the refining process is kind of costly in India. Alright, and that is why the petroleum is costly here, petroleum and its products. So 63% increase in the past 10 years, alright, in our consumption, but our refining capacity has grown only by 15%. So this is like something that is 4 times lower, more than 4 times lower to the kind of consumption rise that has been witnessed. Alright, so no wonder we are lagging behind, and we will be lagging behind drastically in future too. Gas consumption has increased 38%, while production has actually fallen since 2012. So next point you are supposed to note, gas consumption has gas consumption has increased by 38%. Alright, and of course the production has also for the gas has also gone down. So we are clearly not meeting with the increasing demand. Alright, India's energy security does require a large strategic storage of oil to take care of any vagaries in its international supply chain. India has been building up its stored reserves while international oil prices have dropped in the past couple of years. But the strategic storage of oil does not tackle the systemic causes of this high dependence on oil. Alright, so what do you mean by the strategic storage of oil? So strategic storage of oil basically means the oil that is stored in different countries. Alright, so we have a lot of deals with other foreign nation oil companies, right? So we have a deal with Russia, we have a deal with Mongolian companies, a lot of Middle East companies, where Indian ONGC, Alright, the Oil and Natural Gas Corporation of India. They have their overseas branch. They have been shareholders in foreign oil companies. Alright, and they have have a lot of joint projects going on in the oil field. So basically, we have oil reserves for India, outside India, in the other foreign nations. Alright, so these are known as the strategic storage of oil. Alright, this is what they mean by strategic storage of oil. And these reserves have been built up at a time when the oil prices are actually going low. Okay, so in this point, what they're saying is, when our dependence on oil is actually increasing, all these things will not make any sense. Alright, because we have to actually counter the dependence of oil, not with these strategic reserves, but with something more, because the rise in dependence, the demand for oil is actually drastically increasing. Okay, next point. The peaking of India's oil demand could have been envisaged but has not been identified in the DNEP. On the one hand, the draft policy recognizes that by 2040, India's oil import dependence may reach 55% from the current level of 33%. So that's not this one down. So by 2040, India's oil dependence might rise by 55%, alright, compared to the current dependence percentage of 33%. Alright, so that is what is going to happen according to their projection. On the other hand, it offers nothing to curtail such dependence. So this report just says that we are dependent on oil a lot, and the dependence is going to increase even more, but there is no solution that has been provided of how to reduce this dependence. Alright, unless electric transport is carefully planned, India's dependence on imported oil is likely to continue. Alright, so this is the last point on this. So we have to reduce our dependence on oil and go for the other sources of energy, be it nuclear or be it any wind energy, solar energy and all that. So basically they are saying we have to shift our focus, our dependence, and we have to meet our dependence and demand from these sources rather than oil. Alright, so only then we'll be able to survive. But anyways, the three-stage nuclear plan that has been devised for India, right, by Baba. Alright, so that you might remember, the three-stage nuclear plan, which uses thorium to produce electricity, and India is the largest. India has the largest reserves for thorium, so we'll be the first country in the world to actually have that thorium nuclear capable reactors. So we are currently in the second phase of it. So when these things actually happen, when the thorium reactors come online, we will be completely energy independent. So the dependence on oil and dependence on all the other sources of energy will actually come down. Alright, and we are not very far ahead in completing that project, that ambitious project. We're just probably some 7 or 8 years behind. Alright, so when that happens, obviously we didn't care about these things, and probably that is why the consecutive governments are not completely trying to shift away from the current current dependence on oil. Because if you're going to invest so much of money in other things, in other ambitious projects, when this thorium reactors kind of thing come in line, you would have actually wasted all your money by then, right? And you won't be able to support the thorium project in the first place then. So this is what silently that is happening, but still we have to currently make sure that the demand is met by other sources. That's what this article actually says. Going to the next article, the title suggests awestruck. The Nobel Prize for Physics is a recognition of a project involving a rare kind of coordination. That is the subheading. So the first point, in addition to 2 detectors of LIGO, the advanced Virgo came online on August 1 this year. The advantage of having 3 detectors is that the location of the source can be determined more accurately. With the Japanese Kagra detector set to go online in 2019 and LIGO India set to join in 2024, the possibility of using gravitational wave astronomy to look back in time at the very origin of the universe has increased. Right? So this is the important point from this. This is about the Nobel Prize that was won by a team of researchers and scientists in physics, alright, for detecting the gravitational waves, for proving that gravitational waves exist, alright. And LIGO is a kind of gravitational wave observatory, alright, and Virgo also, alright, that came in line very recently, August 1st this year. So you have to LIGO, they won't be asking because everybody knows what LIGO is by now, but you should remember Virgo when it came online, alright. So how it's gonna end, and you should remember Virgo is actually related to gravitational wave detection, and Japanese Kaga, KRGA. So their detector is also a gravitational wave detector that is gonna come by 2019, alright, 2 years from now. And then LIGO India. So LIGO India is something, you know, it's by its very name, you know that it's the Indian version of LIGO, alright, and it's gonna come by 2024. So all these, just remember that these things are related to gravitational wave detection, alright. And although all these things are for gravitational wave detection, just remember that this is happening through international cooperation, alright. So this is important in the sense what these things work for, what these things stand for, from the prelims perspective. From the mains perspective, we have to discuss about the kind of cooperation that actually happens and how this will affect the future scientific community, and how it will affect our country, right? How the study of gravitational waves, how it will have a positive impact on India. Alright, so these are the things you should look when you're answering your mains answers. Alright. Next, going to the next opinion column. The heading is Steadying Hand. By holding policy rates, the RBI shifts focus to the government to give a flip to growth. What is it? These are many. Let's start with the first point. It follows then that the central bank's rate setting panel opted to leave benchmark interest rates unchanged and retain a neutral stance to achieve the medium-term target of keeping consumer price index inflation close to 4% on a durable basis. Alright? So consumer price index, first of all, let's go through to the points one by one, alright? So they have left the policy rates unchanged. So what you mean by the policy rate? I told you it is the repo rate, alright? So the repo rate is the rate of interest at which the commercial banks like HDFC, Axis or ICICI, at which the commercial banks gets loans from RBI. Alright, so that is only known as the repo rate. So as of now, the way the industry is and the way the economy is going, RBI has decided to stick to the same rate. No increase and no decrease. But they have made sure that they stick to the consumer price index inflation of 4%. Alright, so now consumer price index inflation. Alright, so that is something that is related to the total cost price rise of the commodities that come to the consumer. Alright, the last stage, not wholesale. Alright, this is after the taxes and all that. So after the taxes and subsidies or whatever it is, the kind of inflation they are considering. So they are including all the factors. Alright, the charges, the surcharges, the service tax and that tax and these taxes. and all that. They're including all that, and they're calculating the inflation, the price rise now. Alright, that is only known as the consumer price index inflation. Wholesale price index inflation is wholesale price is the price that the distributor gives to the store owner, right? So that is how we were measuring before. Right now we have shifted to consumer price. Alright, so after it comes to the store, the kind of price rise and all that, alright, that can be due to several factors. So we have started considering the price rise that comes to the commodity, that happens to the commodity that are there in the stores ready for sale, alright. So that is CPII. Add to this the uncertainty posed by the prospects of weaker than anticipated kharif crop output, and the impact this may have on food prices, and the concerns agitating policymakers will be evident. There are also the not so small matters of farm loan waivers by states that could roil the quality of public spending and exert price pressures, as well as the question of when states may decide to implement their own salary and allowance increases in the wake of Centre's 7th Pay Commission implementation. Alright, so sticking to the price rise thing, alright, the uncertainty of sticking to that price rise to the inflation rate of 4%, those factors that might spoil this target, alright. So those factors that can spoil, we have to remember the points. The kharif crop harvest wasn't that good, alright, so that would be the first point. Second point would be the farm loan waivers by the state, alright. So when they are actually cancelling out the loans that were given to the farmers, like the repaying part, alright. So when they're waiving off the loans, what would happen is the onus or the burden actually shifts to the government and ultimately to the central government, alright. So this would actually lead to a lot of debt to the central government. So when those kind of things happen, the general commodities price would actually kind of rise, alright. So next point under this was when the states actually decide to implement the 7th Pay Commission rules, alright. So when the 7th Pay Commission, which gives out increased salary, alright, when the state actually kind of tries to implement the rules according to the 7th Pay Commission, what would happen is it would disperse more money, right? So more money means people will have more money in their hand, and that will lead to more demand of commodities, and more demand in commodities will lead to again a price rise, alright. That is the general logic behind economics, right? So that is the general economic logic of price rise. So that would happen. So these all are gonna actually affect the price rise target that has been set by the government. An escalation of global geopolitical uncertainty and heightened volatility in financial markets due to the US Fed's plans of balance sheet unwinding, and the risk of normalization by European Central Bank in the face of such a juxtaposition of risks to the outlook for price stability. So the other international factors now. So remember the international factors that could affect our target, alright. So the first factor is gonna be US Fed's balance sheet unwinding, alright. So when that happens, balance sheet unwinding, I just told you, that is supposed to be a case when the US Federal Reserve, that is their central bank, is gonna sell the securities, whatever they have, alright. So the securities and holdings, when they are trying to sell it, people would buy it, alright. So obviously money comes back to the central bank, so meaning they don't want so much of dollars to be out, alright. They want to make sure the dollar actually appreciates, the dollar becomes more valuable. So this could actually affect everybody. And along with that, the European Union is also gonna do something very similar. So normalization of the European Central Bank. Normalization basically means they are doing the same process as the US does. I mean, reducing the balance sheets, unwinding the balance sheets, like selling off the securities and the treasury bills they have. Along with that, they will also increase short-term market interest rates. So short-term market interest rates, repo rate, alright, basically is a short-term loan, alright. Bank rate is the long-term loan. So what they are trying to say here, they are directly pointing out towards the repo rate. So they would increase the repo rate. So when you increase the repo rate, meaning the interest rate is increased, banks will get fewer loans will be dispersed to the citizens of the country, and fewer, comparatively lesser money with people, and the demand and everything goes down, and the dollar or the euro, that will also increase in value. So that is also done. And also with the securities that they're going to issue, right, the maturities and all will be set to a lower level. It's not like you purchase a security and you get a lot of returns, lot of interest in return. No, that will also be reduced. Alright, so all these measures that would lead to the currency getting more valuable. Alright, so when the currency, all these measures that will lead to the currency to go to a level of appreciation. All these things are known as normalization or winding up and all that. Alright, so all these things will also affect our economy directly. Alright, that is what this point says. Moving on to the next editorial. Heading says the telecom battle lines, why the interconnection usage charge matters. Alright, you know that the interconnection usage charges, that problem is happening between the government, the other telecom majors, and Jio on one side, Jio Reliance on one side. I told you that day, when a mobile, when you make a call, for example, if you are from a Vodafone, you're a Vodafone subscriber and you're calling to Airtel subscriber. So when you're actually calling the Airtel people, alright, Airtel subscriber, you're actually using Airtel's tower, alright. So when Vodafone is actually kind of using Airtel's tower, you're actually using the tower, right? So therefore you have to pay a certain charge to Airtel, alright. So that is the point of friction between the government and the telecom operators. Government is trying to reduce those charges, alright, and the telecom operators are like, you can't do that, we'll lose a lot of money if you do that. And Jio is saying, let's put the burden on the customers, alright. But Jio can say that and get away with it because Jio is dependent on 4G, which is internet, alright, not voice calling. So when they are dependent on internet and they're making these calls, those network operators that rely on voice calls will be left out, right? So Jio cannot compare themselves to the other operators who actually depend on voice calls and not the 4G calls, alright, not internet calling, alright. Of course, if that is gonna be happening ultimately, it is wise for the other telecom operators to shift themselves to the 4G thing itself, alright, internet calling. So if they do that, probably they'll survive. But if this goes through, the internet the telecom operators feel that they'll be doomed, alright, they'll face huge losses. So let's start. What is the controversy? The decision follows a prolonged battle between Mukesh Ambani-led Reliance Jio and the top three telecompanies, Airtel, Vodafone and Idea. While the top operators had pitched for doubling the mobile termination charges, and mobile termination charges are as same as the interconnection usage charges, alright. So don't confuse yourself with it, alright. Just remember, mobile termination charges is the same as the IUC, the interconnection usage charge, alright. So the top operators have actually suggested to the government for doubling these rates, and the government is saying we're going to cut off these rates eventually, alright. While the top operators had pitched for doubling the mobile termination charges to over 30 paise to recover the cost, the newer rival has suggested zero charges and shifting to the bill and keep regime, under which operators bill their own subscribers for outgoing calls and keep the revenue received. They do not pay any termination charges to each other. Alright, so like I said, the telecom companies, what Jio is actually suggesting is charge the consumer itself. No need for one company to give to another company and all. Alright, next point. The two sides have been involved in a war of words over the issue. The industry anticipates that TRAI's Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, alright, decision to cut IUC and gradually do away with it will lead to a loss of over 5,000 crore annually to the three big incumbents, while resulting in an annual saving of around the same amount for Reliance Jio. So you understood? So Reliance will be actually saving 5,000 crores because they are using internet calls and they are not expected to pay anything for the other people, right? But on the other hand, these people will be losing it. The towers are entirely different. These people rely on voice calls, alright? So therefore they will be losing 5,000 crores. At the same time, Reliance Jio will be actually gaining 5,000 crores. What has TRAI reasoned? It adds that these charges work as an disincentive for deployment for new technologies such as VoLTE or voice over long-term evolution. So remember what VoLTE stands for. This can come in prelims. Alright, so since it is in the news, this might come. There are a lot of chances for this to come in prelims. So VoLTE stands for voice over long-term evolution and migration to internet protocol networks by operators, wherein there are no interconnection charges. So according to the government, this is a move that is going to encourage future technologies like 4G, 5G and all that is going to come. Alright, so when you're giving incentives like this, more operators and more foreign companies will try to introduce their technologies, these latest technologies into India. That is what they feel. TRAI points out that the cost of voice turns out to be a fraction of a paisa per minute, and over-the-top applications such as Skype or WhatsApp, and it will be virtually impossible for a telecom service provider to compete against these if additional cost in the form of MTC is imposed. Alright, so if these companies come into being, the 4G and the internet companies start marketing their thing, and calls are made through internet, which will be really cheap. Alright, so they're saying these companies would go out of business. Alright, if the internet calling companies come and they try to dominate, these companies will go out of business. So that is what the Airtel, Vodafone and Idea companies are actually alleging would happen to them if the internet companies take the center stage. Alright, obviously they can always change their technologies into it, but I think too much money has been invested in the voice calling towers, right? So it's not like they could just straight away shift to a complete internet based calling system. That would be not possible. Jio has done it because they are entering the market, and from the first day they have constructed towers that supports internet calling, so no problem for them. The problem is for these companies. Alright, so obviously there has to be a deal that is bipartisan type, which would positively affect everybody. So let's see what happens. So the last editorial for the day, the heading says Mrs. Sarojini Naidu's speech at Delhi. Alright, so straight away I'm not going through the entire speech and the opinion about it. I'm just going to tell you about the points that would be useful for you in the mains answer writing or even in prelims. Alright, so only those points I'll be going through, like I said. So the first one, the first important point, in agitating for home rule, they were only asking for what was their hereditary right. In the days of the Mughal kings, the conquered Hindus were given power. Those who were to be chained became advisors and counselors In the reign of Akbar, the Hindus were in all departments of administration. The result was not anarchy or misrule. There was not one instance of mistrust of power. Alright? So the point you have to note here is how those Hindu rulers, or whatever religion they belonged to, they were actually given power even after they were defeated. They were actually known as Watan Jagirs. Alright? So Watan Jagirs actually are those people who are actually defeated by the Mughal Empire. Alright? So basically during Akbar's period. So those kings who were defeated by Akbar in war, those provinces were given back to the kings. So Akbar was saying, you just come under my kingdom, alright? You just come under my empire, pay the taxes and all that, and you can still have your sovereign rights and your rights to rule the land, and I will not disturb you in that. And even in the local politics, that's what Akbar said. So when stuff like this was done, those rulers were actually okay with Akbar. They were more than willing to come under Akbar's empire. So that was done, and she is pointing out towards how the level of religious tolerance, alright, that existed during the Mughal Empire. How Hindus were actually given top ministerial posts and all. Alright, so that is basically the important point in what she has said. That is useful for us. This can be used in how the Mughal dominated period saw a lot of rational and saw a lot of religious tolerance and all. Of course, under Aurangzeb, everything spiraled out of control. Alright, but before him, things were under control. Alright, because you cannot suppress the population for a longer duration, right? So Muslims were supposed to be minorities. So minorities taking over the majority of the population of a different faith, that will not last long. So the rulers were kind of intelligent in that perspective. So they need the support of the local people, and obviously they were tolerant towards the local religions. Alright, so that's what she has pointed out. So with this we wrap up the editorials and opinion columns for the day. So please take note of all these things. These will be very important and very useful. They will come in handy for your mains answer writing as well as prelims. Alright, so take care until the next editorial. We will meet up very soon. I'll be going through the editorials and the opinion columns again for the date of 6th October. Alright, so see you then. Take care.